Tonight is not an ordinary night. This is the moment when heaven listens closely, when your whispered prayer becomes a divine transaction, when burdens lift, wounds begin to heal, and closed doors receive God's touch. As you prepare to rest, God is preparing to work. What the enemy meant to disturb your sleep, God will turn into a doorway of peace. What tried to weaken your faith today will become the testimony of your breakthrough tomorrow. Night prayer is a sacred doorway where the soul steps out of chaos and into divine calm. When the sun goes down and the noise of the day fades, God creates a quiet space where His voice can be heard more clearly than the voices of fear, stress, and uncertainty. Many people search for peace during the day through distractions, conversations, or activity, yet true peace is not found in movement, it is found in surrender. Night prayer is the moment you release control and acknowledge that God is greater than everything you face throughout the day. During the night, the human heart is most honest. There is no audience, no performance, no pressure to appear strong. It is just you and God. In that honesty, peace begins to flow. When you pray at night, you are not informing God of your problems. You are positioning your heart to receive His presence. Peace does not come because situations instantly change, but because your spirit reconnects with the one who never changes. God's peace does not depend on circumstances. It rests on His authority. Many believers struggle because they carry the weight of tomorrow into the night. They lie down physically, but their minds remain standing, alert and burdened. Thoughts race, fears replay, and worries multiply in the darkness. Night prayer interrupts this cycle. It is a spiritual command that tells your mind to submit to God's truth instead of feeding on anxiety. As you pray, your thoughts slow down, your breathing becomes steady, and your heart aligns with heaven's rhythm. This alignment is where peace is born. Peace is not passive, it is powerful. When you pray at night, you are engaging in spiritual warfare in the most effective way by trusting God completely. Fear loses its grip when faith speaks. Anxiety weakens when God's promises are declared. Night prayer allows you to replace every what if with God is able. Each word spoken in faith becomes a shield guarding your heart and mind as you rest. The night is also a time when emotions surface. Unresolved pain, disappointments, regrets, and silent tears often appear when everything becomes quiet. God does not avoid these moments, He waits for them. Night prayer invites God into the hidden places of the heart. When you bring these emotions to Him instead of suppressing them, His peace begins to heal what stress has damaged. Peace is not denial, it is divine assurance that you are not alone. When you pray at night, you acknowledge that your strength has limits, but God's strength does not. You stop striving and start trusting. This shift releases a supernatural calm that cannot be explained logically. Even when answers are not immediate, peace settles because your spirit knows God is in control. This peace protects you from emotional exhaustion and spiritual burnout. Night prayer also realigns your identity. During the day, voices from work, society, and circumstances try to define you. Failure may whisper that you are not enough, and pressure may convince you that you must handle everything alone. Night prayer silences those voices and restores truth. As you pray, God reminds you who you are in Him, loved, protected, and secure. That revelation produces deep peace that no external situation can steal. There is a divine exchange that takes place in night prayer. You bring God your fear, and He replaces it with confidence. You offer Him your confusion, and He gives clarity. You surrender your restlessness, and He grants rest for your soul. This exchange is not symbolic, it is spiritual and real. Many do not experience peace simply because they never release what they are holding. Night prayer is the act of opening your hands and allowing God to take what is heavy. Peace during the night also prepares you for victory during the day. When you sleep in peace, you wake with strength. Rested faith produces bold obedience. Night prayer ensures that your sleep is not disturbed by fear or spiritual attack. When your spirit is covered in prayer, your rest becomes protected territory. God stands guard over the one who trusts Him. The power of night prayer is not found in length or eloquence, but in sincerity. Even a simple prayer whispered with faith can shift the atmosphere of your heart. God responds to trust, not performance. When you pray with expectation, peace flows naturally. Your spirit senses that heaven has heard you, and that awareness alone brings calm. Night prayer trains the heart to depend on God daily. It becomes a rhythm of faith, a spiritual habit that strengthens trust over time. Each night you pray, peace grows deeper and fear loses more ground. Over time, your soul learns to rest quickly because it recognizes God's presence. This is not emotional peace, it is spiritual stability. As you consistently pray at night, you will notice that situations that once disturbed you no longer have the same power. Problems may still exist, but they no longer dominate your emotions. Peace becomes your foundation, not your reward. You stop reacting and start resting, knowing God is actively involved in your life even when you are asleep. Night prayer is a declaration that God is your refuge. It is the final word of your day, spoken in faith rather than fear. When the day ends in prayer, the night becomes holy ground. Peace descends not because everything is perfect, but because God is present. Night prayer opens a sacred window where God's healing power flows deeply into the human life. When the body becomes still and the noise of the world fades, the spirit becomes receptive. Healing often requires quietness because restoration begins where resistance ends. During the day, people push through pain, suppress emotions, and ignore spiritual wounds just to survive responsibilities. But at night, when strength runs out, God's grace steps in. Night prayer is the moment you stop pretending to be strong and allow God to be your healer. Healing is not limited to the physical body. Many people carry invisible wounds, emotional scars from rejection, disappointment from unanswered prayers, exhaustion from long battles, and grief that words cannot describe. These wounds may not show outwardly, but they drain joy, peace, and faith. Night prayer invites God into those hidden places. When you speak to God honestly in the stillness of the night, His healing presence begins to touch what medicine, logic, and encouragement could not reach. The human soul heals best when it feels safe. Night prayer creates that safety. There is no rush, no comparison, no judgment. It is just you and God. In that sacred space, you can release tears you held back all day, confess fears you never voiced, and admit weakness you tried to hide. God does not rebuke vulnerability, He responds to it. Healing flows where humility opens the door. Many believers ask why healing seems delayed. Often it is because healing requires rest, and rest requires trust. Night prayer teaches you to trust God with your pain. Instead of fighting through it alone, you surrender it into His hands. This surrender is not defeat, it is faith. When you pray at night, you are saying, God, I cannot fix myself, but I believe you can restore me. That faith activates healing power. Physical healing is also closely connected to spiritual peace. Stress, fear, and anxiety weaken the body over time. Night prayer releases these burdens, allowing the body to respond to God's design for restoration. As you pray, tension leaves your muscles, your breathing steadies, and your nervous system calms. This is not coincidence, it is divine order. God created the body to heal best when the soul is at rest. When you declare God's promises over your body at night, you are aligning yourself with His word. Words spoken in faith during prayer are not empty sounds, they carry spiritual authority. Night prayer becomes a time where you speak life instead of accepting sickness as permanent. Even if symptoms remain, something shifts internally. Hope rises, faith strengthens, and healing begins its work layer by layer. Emotional healing often starts at night because that is when memories surface. Old conversations replay, past failures resurface, and unresolved pain knocks loudly. Instead of letting those memories torment you, night prayer hands them to God. As you bring painful memories into His presence, He removes their power to hurt you. The memory may remain, but the pain attached to it fades. That is healing. Night prayer also heals the mind. Many suffer from overthinking, mental fatigue, and spiritual confusion. The mind needs renewal just as much as the body. When you pray at night, God's peace washes over your thoughts. Confusion gives way to clarity, and heaviness lifts. The mind begins to rest, not because problems are solved, but because God's wisdom replaces mental strain. There is a special kind of healing that happens when you pray consistently at night. Over time, your heart becomes softer, more hopeful, and more resilient. Wounds that once controlled your emotions lose their influence. You begin to respond defer to situations that once triggered pain. This is evidence of inner healing at work. God does not just patch wounds, He restores strength. Night prayer also breaks the cycle of emotional suppression. Many people function outwardly but are broken inwardly. They smile during the day and suffer at night. Prayer changes this pattern. Instead of letting pain build silently, you release it daily before God. This release prevents bitterness, depression, and spiritual numbness. Healing flows when pain is acknowledged in God's presence. God's healing is often gentle, not forceful. It does not rush, but it is thorough. Night prayer allows this gentle work to happen. As you rest in prayer, God repairs what stress has damaged and renews what hardship has drained. You may not feel instant results, but healing is taking place beneath the surface. Growth often happens quietly. Night prayer also restores hope, which is essential for healing. Without hope, healing feels impossible. As you pray, God reminds you that your condition is not your conclusion. Faith is renewed and expectation returns. Hope itself is medicine for the soul. When hope rises, healing accelerates. Healing through night prayer is not always dramatic, but it is lasting. God heals at the root, not just the surface. He strengthens the spirit, renews the mind, and refreshes the body. This holistic healing prepares you not just to survive, but to live with purpose and peace. As night prayer becomes a habit, your trust in God deepens. You begin to rely less on your own strength and more on His power. This reliance removes pressure and invites rest. Healing thrives where pressure is absent. God works best when you stop striving and start trusting. Night prayer is a declaration that pain will not have the final word. It is an act of faith that places your healing journey into God's hands. Even when progress feels slow, prayer keeps you connected to the source of restoration. Every night you pray, you move closer to wholeness. Healing is not always about changing circumstances. Sometimes it is about transforming the heart. Night prayer allows God to do both. As you rest in His presence, healing flows quietly, deeply, and faithfully, touching every area of your life that needs restoration. Night prayer positions you at the place where God works beyond human effort. When the body rests and the mind slows, faith becomes active in its purest form. Breakthrough is often misunderstood as something that happens through struggle, noise, and relentless effort, but spiritual breakthrough is frequently released through surrender. Night prayer is the language of surrender. It declares that God is working even when you stop working, that heaven moves even when you cannot see movement. During the day, people attempt to fix everything with their own strength. They analyze, plan, worry, and try again, often becoming exhausted and discouraged. Night prayer interrupts this cycle of human dependence. When you pray before sleep, you transfer responsibility from your limited hands into God's unlimited power. This transfer is not symbolic, it is spiritual authority in action. You are acknowledging that God can do more in one moment than you can do in a lifetime of striving. Breakthrough often requires divine timing. Many delays are not denials but preparations. Night prayer aligns your heart with God's timing instead of your impatience. While you sleep, God works in ways you cannot measure or control. He rearranges circumstances, softens hearts, removes unseen obstacles, and opens doors that were previously sealed. What seems silent on earth is often active in the spiritual realm. When you pray at night, you disengage from panic and engage with trust. Trust is the key that unlocks breakthrough. Fear blocks faith, but faith invites movement. As you pray, fear loses its voice, and faith gains authority. This shift allows God to intervene without resistance. Breakthrough flows best where trust is complete. Night prayer also protects you from spiritual exhaustion. Many people burn out spiritually because they carry battles into their sleep. They lie down with worries, arguments, and unanswered questions. Night prayer releases these burdens. When you give God the final word of your day, your spirit rests under divine covering. That rest strengthens you for what lies ahead and positions you to recognize breakthrough when it comes. Breakthrough does not always arrive as a sudden event. Sometimes it unfolds quietly through a series of divine adjustments. Night prayer keeps your heart sensitive to these adjustments. As you rest in prayer, God gives wisdom, direction, and clarity. You may wake with insight you did not have before, or with peace that confirms a decision. These subtle shifts are often the foundation of major breakthroughs. There are battles that cannot be won through argument, force, or persistence alone. They require divine intervention. Night prayer invites that intervention. When you pray instead of worrying, you are declaring spiritual authority over your situation. You are saying that your battle belongs to God. This declaration releases heaven's involvement. God fights battles you cannot fight and resolves issues you cannot solve. Night prayer also breaks spiritual resistance. Some delays are caused by opposition that cannot be seen with natural eyes. Prayer disrupts that resistance. When you pray in faith, barriers weaken, confusion clears, and progress begins. Even when you do not see immediate results, something shifts in the unseen realm. That shift eventually manifests as breakthrough. Faith grows strongest in stillness. Night prayer strengthens faith because it removes distractions. In the quiet of the night, your spirit becomes focused and receptive. As you pray, your confidence in God deepens. This confidence is not emotional, it is rooted assurance. Breakthrough follows assurance because doubt no longer interferes with belief. Night prayer trains the heart to wait without anxiety. Waiting is not weakness, it is faith in motion. As you pray at night, you learn to rest while trusting God's process. This kind of waiting does not weaken you, it prepares you. When breakthrough arrives, you are spiritually ready to handle it with humility and wisdom. Many breakthroughs are delayed because people stop praying when progress seems slow. Night prayer builds consistency. It keeps faith alive even when circumstances remain unchanged. Every night you pray, you are watering seeds that God has already planted. Growth may be invisible for a season, but prayer ensures that the roots grow deep enough to sustain the breakthrough when it comes. Night prayer also realigns your expectations. Sometimes people expect God to work only in dramatic ways. Prayer teaches patience and trust. As you pray consistently, you begin to recognize God's hand in small victories, quiet answers, and subtle favor. These small movements often lead to major breakthroughs. Breakthrough also requires obedience, and obedience is strengthened through prayer. When you pray at night, God often speaks direction into your heart. This direction may not always be comfortable, but it is always purposeful. As you obey, doors begin to open. Night prayer sharpens your spiritual hearing, allowing you to move in alignment with God's will. There is peace that comes when you know God is working while you sleep. That peace protects your heart from discouragement. Discouragement weakens faith, but peace strengthens endurance. Night prayer keeps your anchored. Even when answers delay, you remain confident because prayer assures you that God has not forgotten you. Breakthrough is often connected to rest. God designed rest as an act of faith. When you sleep after praying, you are demonstrating trust. You are saying that God does not need your anxiety to accomplish His will. This trust invites supernatural movement. God honors faith-filled rest. As night prayer becomes a habit, your life develops a rhythm of trust. Problems no longer dominate your emotions. You respond with prayer instead of panic. This response shifts the atmosphere around you. Where there was pressure, peace appears. Where there was delay, progress begins. Where there was resistance, favor emerges. Night prayer keeps you aligned with God's purpose, even when circumstances confuse you. Alignment is essential for breakthrough. When your heart is aligned, obstacles lose power. God opens the right doors at the right time. Breakthrough becomes a result of relationship, not effort. Praying at night is a declaration that tomorrow belongs to God. You release control over outcomes and rest in His sovereignty. This release creates space for God to move freely. As you sleep, heaven works. As you rest, God arranges. As you trust, breakthrough draws nearer, quietly unfolding in ways beyond human understanding. As you lay down tonight, begin with prayer and end with faith. Speak peace over your heart, healing over your body, and breakthrough over your future. Trust that God is working even now. Sleep in His presence, rest in His promises, and rise tomorrow with renewed strength, because a prayed over night always leads to a victorious morning.